Hello, everybody. We are talking about post-Reconstruction. So, following the Civil War, some of the issues that were going on within the United States, basically rebuilding and setting up the new government following the Civil War. All right, so there were some struggles going on at the time, mainly with the race inequality. And African Americans were able to vote now for the first time and having to deal with that as a nation. So it wasn't just the South that were having issues with it, the North was also. And seeing themselves as one country once again. If you can imagine fighting with your family, it takes a while to mend things. So that's pretty much what's happening in the US at this time. There were economic challenges from rebuilding and the inequality that's developing from the Gilded Age, which was in the last lesson you learned about, and then political instability. We have new political parties developing. This is when the Democrat Party comes in to existence. The first president that's seen as the end of Reconstruction when trying to get the United States back to normal was Rutherford B. Hayes. He set up a new type of reform in government and also ended the role of the Union or the North in the South. The South now has their own control. The troops were all pulled out. Government was put back in their hands and that sort of thing. Also, he tried to set foreign policy with other countries so that U.S. could get back to normal once again. We also have unions developing during this time. The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 was a huge issue where the military was even brought in to combat the strike that was going on. Uh, the government itself was supporting the owners, the big like robber barons of the time, and supporting the money basically, not necessarily the people. We had violent clashes, I mean, against people and the military, and there were lots of deaths. Some of the reforms and acts that came about during this time was the Homestead Act, trying to give land away to people to spread west and to helpfully settle all this open area of what we've seen as the new United States. There's also the Pendleton Act. The Pendleton Act was to try to fix the issues within the government. Different agencies now gave tests that you had to take before you could join and have a job in that. The post office is an example of that. They still have a test today that you have to take before you can be hired at the post office. The Dawes Act was taking Native American lands that they were already given and now taking it back and dividing it up. They did send a lot of the land to individual natives, actual individuals, not whole tribes. And we're trying to set up more of an Americanized system of the Indian and Native American lands, tribal lands in the United States. So not just North and South Dakota, which this picture shows, but that's a huge example so you can see how things were broken down. The next president we had was James Garfield. He was a Civil War veteran. Also, he started out as a teacher, was drafted into the Civil War, and rose all the way to a general. Unfortunately, only a few months into his office as president, he was assassinated. This assassination then led to the presidency of Chester A. Arthur. He was the vice president at the time for Garfield. He was also a Civil War hero, and he went ahead and went with the reforms that Garfield had run by, saying he was going to reform civil service, he was going to expand the U.S.'s presence around the world, that sort of thing. So he was really seen as a pretty good president considering he was originally a vice president. So these three presidents all had similar goals. Hayes, Garfield, and Arthur They all wanted to reform the government in some way, make it less about letting your friends into a position and more about qualified people. They also wanted to get the United States back on the international scene. We are no longer thinking about just our little small country and fixing things within. They wanted to be a world power. So, what did this do? This time period really did have a lasting effect on the United States as a whole. The stability, they were able to get the United States back rolling and into the world scene, as you can see coming up in the next unit. U.S. does become a world power again. They also are trying to reform and make life better for the common man, and also at the same time make the United States whole again, make it one family and no longer, North versus South. So these were lots of changes, but they really did have a lasting effect on how we are today in America.